Well, the local iwi has been represented by at least two of the people. Carlos Spencer is part of the local iwi. Hannah Retta, who was nearly 100, and she was a great person working in the health sector in the pioneer areas, is another local iwi representative. Male and female. We've tried to diversify right across the board. Yes.
Very good, Kerry. We'll look forward to it. And can anybody, I guess, you go to live in and you can see it, you can just see it on the main street?
Just walk down the main street and the plaques are sitting right in front, just near the windows of the shops.
Very good indeed. Thanks for being on, Kerry. All right, we're going to leave you with a bit of jazz. So this is a bit of jazz for that
date that's coming up.
For the date, the Saturday night date. I'm actually not quite sure who this is. Let me know. Oh, it's Thelonious Monk. Thelonious Monk. Around midnight. Never a big fan of Thelonious, but I was a big fan of John Coltrane and Miles Davis. But anyway, Nikki Bazan, Chris Clark, kia ora. Thanks for being with us.
Been a pleasure.
I'm Chapman. I'm back tomorrow, Thursday. See you then, 3:45.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Our haere nei, is an amnesty for overstayers the answer to worker shortages? Some businesses think so. Right now it's a job seekers market with fierce competition and pumped up pay packets. We'll have the latest figures. No regrets for sailors Burling and Tuke who are soaking in silver. Paddling powerhouse Lisa Carrington was back on the water today. We go live to Tokyo. Our seniors stranded in Oz because of the bubble freeze at risk of losing their super. A 20-year-old Sydney man dies from COVID. Has Australia lost control of the virus? And Northland refinery workers feel abandoned by the government as their jobs hang in the balance. RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon, I'm Marama Tipole. The COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins has denounced those spreading lies about the Pfizer vaccine campaign, calling their behaviour reprehensible. About 200 protesters gathered outside Parliament this afternoon to rail against the government's vaccination campaign. But Mr Hipkins says the government will never make vaccination compulsory, despite the protesters' claims.
People are actively lying and sharing information that is going to cause harm, and I think that's reprehensible.
Chris Hipkins says misinformation is causing real problems and appears to be slowing vaccine uptake among port workers. A New Zealand woman in Sydney trying to get home before her pension payments are suspended says the stress is unbearable. Jo Annie Robinson flew to Sydney in March to help her son, who had just been diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer. She had a return flight booked for July the 31st, but it was cancelled and she couldn't secure another before the travel bubble closed. The Ministry of Social Development told her if she's not back by September the 20th, her income will stop because she's been out of the country for 26 weeks.
I'm feeling quite, not feeling very good in my stomach. I feel quite sick about everything that the New Zealand government has put me into such a predicament, like I have nowhere else to go to.
The ministry says it's encouraging Ms Robinson to keep checking the Air New Zealand website and to tell officials if her circumstances change. Those in charge of managed isolation and quarantine are promising to make the booking system for vouchers fairer. Some New Zealanders overseas have been turning to booking services which charge thousands of dollars to try to obtain an MIQ voucher. The head of MIQ, Megan Main, says work is underway to even the playing field.
We're looking at how we can safely and fairly let people know when vouchers are going to be released, particularly those bulk releases that we do every month or so. And I would say that every day we're re-releasing vouchers into the system.
However, Megan Main says waitlists and ballots are also being considered.
The Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust says today's admission of sexual offending by a former member of the West Coast religious community will bring some relief to victims, but the journey is far from over. A man is facing 38 charges of sexual offending between 1986 and 2012, stemming from his time at Gloriavale. He today pleaded guilty to 8 charges of indecently assaulting girls, 2 of indecently assaulting a boy and 1 count of sexual violation. He'll face trial on the other 27. Liz Gregory of the Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust says the community's leadership needs to take responsibility.
Somewhere along the line, the leaders are going to have to be held accountable for creating, maintaining an environment where abuse has flourished and it's run unchecked, and where there's been silencing of victims.
Liz Gregory says about 50 people have recently left the community. RNZ has been banned from using any more of the information stolen in the Waikato District Health Board cyber attack and ordered to permanently delete any copies of it from its systems. The DHB went to the High Court seeking a number of restraining orders after RNZ broadcast a story about a child who spent more than 9 weeks in hospital because Oranga Tamariki failed to find a suitable placement. That story was based on documents published by the hackers on the dark web. In a judgment released today, Justice Churchman stopped short of requiring RNZ to take the story down. However, RNZ cannot use any more of the hacked information and all copies have to be deleted. Head of News Richard Sutherland says RNZ has worked with the DHB to reach this agreement. He says RNZ has previously indicated it has no intention to make use of other documents. He stands by the organisation's view the public interest was best served in bringing the case to light. It's 5:04. Kayaka Lisa Carrington has kept up her winning form at the Tokyo Olympics. She's backed up from yesterday's double gold medal effort to easily win her heat of the K1 500 and advance straight to tomorrow's semi-final. Also through to the semis is fellow New Zealander Caitlin Regal, who Carrington teamed up with yesterday to win the K2 500 gold medal. And Max Brown and Curtis Imrie are into the semis of the men's K2 1000. Golfer Lydia Ko will be ruining her opening round at the Olympics. Ko, the silver medalist at the Rio in 2016, posted 3 birdies, but a double bogey on the par 4 14th proved costly. She also had the chance for a relatively straightforward birdie putt on the 18th, but missed. Having been tied for 3rd midway through her round, Ko eventually finished at 1 under par to be in a share of 13th spot. Sailors Paul Snow Hansen and Dan Wilcox will be hoping to add to New Zealand's medal count. They head into the 470 medal race, which starts in half an hour, in 4th place. While at the Velodrome, the men's team pursued right off against Australia for bronze just before 9 tonight. And Commonwealth Games weightlifting gold medalist David Letty competes in the over 109 kilogram class. The All Blacks have released 5 players from their squad to play in the opening round of National Provincial Championship. TJ Perenara, Braden Ena, Asafo Aumua, Hoskins Sotutu and Tupo Va'ai have left the All Blacks camp in Auckland to join their provincial teams. And that's the news. It's 5:05.
Sizzling hot property.
First home buyers want to get into the market, and at the end of the day, it's probably the investors that we're wanting to slow down.
Soaring winter temperatures.
We are watching for La Nina. La Nina is a climate driver who's sitting at the wheel of Mother Nature's car. That's a climate driver.
And hot on the water.
Certainly got lost for a lot of words, but it was just a whole occasion. Just so very, very proud of Lisa and her achievements.
The burning questions. Morning reports. Weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. Northern and western areas from Northland to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Fine today. Rain developing overnight or in the morning with possible thunderstorms from Taranaki northwards, then easing for a time later tomorrow. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa fine. Cloudy tomorrow with scattered rain from late morning. Marlborough, Nelson, Bulla, Westland and Fiordland fine today with increasing high cloud. Periods of rain or showers tomorrow. Canterbury, Otago and Southland. High cloud increasing. Brief rain or showers for tomorrow, mainly in the morning. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, rain and southwest gales both easing tomorrow morning. It's 5:07.
Kia ora rā marama. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A call for an overstayer amnesty to help with labour shortages. The Employers and Manufacturers Association says as well as letting more recognised seasonal workers into the country, the government should also allow people with expired visas to work legally too. The government has this week announced one-way quarantine-free travel into New Zealand for workers from Samoa, Tonga and Vanuatu. The EMA says there needs to be a clear pathway to residency for people from the Pacific Islands, and the ones already here illegally should be allowed to work. Ko taku manuhere I Naianei ko Brett O'Reilly. Brett's the boss of the EMA and he joins me now. Hi Brett, can you talk me through your thinking here?
Kia ora, Lisa. This has come about as we've been talking to our members over recent months about potential solutions for solving the skills chasm and the shortage of labour in New Zealand. There are 14,000 overstayers currently in New Zealand. That's 14,000 people that have homes that could be working, and we'd like to see as many of those people in the workplace as possible.
Who's out there, do you think, in terms of overstayers?
Look, we know a third of those overstayers are from Samoa or Tonga, and that's obviously particularly relevant given the dawn raid apology made by the government in the weekend. And we think, and we've said to the government, to ministers and to officials, that we thought that it was completely appropriate that the dawn raid apology was accompanied by an amnesty and a pathway to residency for those workers. And we know that has a double benefit. It has a benefit for the New Zealand economy because we get them working and we get incomes into those communities. And it also has an impact for their home countries because we know that many of those people are sending remittances home to Samoa, Tonga and to other islands. And that benefits those economies who have been really badly hit by COVID. So it's a win-win for everybody and frankly a no-brainer.
Brett, people who may be critical of this will wonder, why are you saying this now? Is it just because you're in a bind, you've got a really tight labour market, so you think, OK, let's get on board with an amnesty?
No, it's not for that reason. I think it's because we now better understand the issue. You know, we've got a fantastic young Pacific Island leader, Saya Mataeli, who's part of the EMA board. And Saya's given us a really good insight into some of the issues in that community. I can honestly say, even in my old role at ATED, I really wasn't acutely aware that this was the issue that it was, and that's probably a poor reflection on all of us, not understanding that community. And it doesn't just impact work, it impacts education, it impacts people not participating in the formal economy. And so the insight that Saya has given us, I'm on the Pacific Pay Gap Inquiry working with the Equal Employment Commissioner, Karanina Sumio, and through that work, which we've been doing now over a couple of years working with the Commissioner, we understand a lot more about the issues in that community, and we think we're in a position to do something about it. And the good news is employers are all up for it, and I think it's exciting. We just need to get the government to move more quickly and to get things rolling.
Brett, if you're totally upfront about this, how many of your members will be paying workers who are overstayers, who are not here legally?
Look, very hard to tell, Lisa.
But are some of them, Brett?
I honestly don't know that. I'd only be guessing at that. But we're happy to get them behind that issue. It's one of the reasons why I'm participating directly on the Pacific Pay Gap Inquiry. I'm part of the advisory group for that. I mean, we want to get our heads into these issues. We want to understand, why is it that Pacific Island workers are paid lower than Pākehā or Māori workers in New Zealand, and we want to understand what are the dynamics of this part of the economy, so we can get people working. And now's the perfect opportunity to do it. Yes, it is a compelling event because of COVID-19, but frankly, it's something that we should be interested in anyway.
And what are you hearing about from the government about this?
Well, I think one of the conundrums for the policymakers is feeling that if we were to do it for the Pacific Island community, we should do it for everybody else. And the moment you open it up to everybody else, there are complex issues, and we understand that. But We have demonstrated through COVID-19 that we were willing to make exceptions, that we were willing to get out there and be bold in response to it. So that's what we're calling for here. Let's be bold. If there are constraints with doing it with other parts of the migrant community, then let's just call that out and have a timeline to work through it. I think people
Okay, so Brett, you've identified one of the key issues yourself there, ring fencing, right? So how do you just ring fence Pacific Island overstayers and give them the right to work here legally and a path to residency?
Well, I think we have a unique relationship with the Pacific Islands. Like we have a unique relationship with Australia. And I think that's a really sensible place to start. And I think that doing it in conjunction with the Dawn Raid apology would be something that everybody would understand.
But Brett, I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but by doing that, are you not just recreating the wrongs of the past in the sense that you are excluding another group of people based on where they come from?
I don't. So to be clear, I don't think we should be excluding everybody, and
giving them a status that is behind another group of people purely based on their origins.
So I'll be really clear, Lisa. If I had my way, I would give an amnesty to everybody tomorrow, and then it would take this issue away. There's 14,000 people. They're living in New Zealand. We want them working. Let's do it. If there are some reasons that I'm not aware that prevent us from doing that, let's at least agree a timetable that within a particular period of time, hopefully as short as possible, all of those people are over the line. But frankly, we've been bold so far with COVID-19 with what we've been willing to do. I don't see any reason to not be bold today and signal that those 14,000 people can be participating in the economy like everybody else.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Brett O'Reilly, who's the kaiwhaka haere of the EMA. Now, I'm keen for your thoughts on this one. Homai o whakaaro. Let me know what you reckon. Should there be an amnesty? Brett O'Reilly saying it should. Well, he'd like it to apply in the first instance to Pacific Island overstayers. We have a unique relationship with the islands, he says, but if he had his way, he'd open the gates to all overstayers. Let us know what you think. Text me on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint at rnz.co.nz. Pensioners struggling to get home from Australia are having their superannuation payments stopped, and some may be forced to start paying them back. RNZ has spoken to people who needed to travel across the ditch for various reasons, but have since become trapped because of the suspension of the travel bubble. They say if the stress of trying to secure an MIQ spot wasn't bad enough, they're now contending with financial hardship. Emma Hatton reports.
Joanne Robinson flew to Sydney in March to help her son, who had just been diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer. She had a return flight booked for July the 31st and enough heart medication to last her stay. However, that flight was cancelled. She couldn't secure another one before the travel bubble closed altogether. Her medication is running out, and she's been told by the government if she's not back by September the 20th, her pension will be stopped. The travel suspension in place from New South Wales will be until at least September the 18th.
So feeling quite, not feeling very good in my stomach. I feel quite sick about everything that the New Zealand government has put me into such a predicament, like I have nowhere else to go to.
And if she can't get back by the following month, she'll need to start repaying the superannuation she received while she was offshore. Another woman, Frances, flew to Sydney in February to be with family, but ended up prolonging her stay because she had to undergo emergency surgery and was only recently given clearance by doctors to fly.
And I had treatment that lasted till mid-July, trying to get home before the cut-off point for superannuation, but the flights have stopped. So MSD have kindly told me that they will not extend the superannuation payments, and Australia have told me I'm not eligible for the pension because I'm not staying permanently.
She was told her pension would be stopped as well, but the Ministry of Social Development has since taken a look at her special circumstances and reversed that decision. She says while that brings some relief, she's disappointed of the stress she was put through. Neither of the women were eligible for a place on the government-managed flights out of New South Wales because they arrived in Sydney before April the 6th. A beneficiary advocate, Kay Brereton, says people in these circumstances are being treated unfairly.
They're not people who went on holiday for a bit of a gallivant overseas because the borders were open. They're people who went over there to connect with family, quite often unwell family, and we need to realise that this isn't just all holidaymakers stuck in New South Wales. There's a whole heap of reasons, and some of them really deserve our compassion.
She says there's no reason why people's financial support should be cut off.
When we had our lockdown in 2020, we had people who were on benefit or eligible for benefit all around the world, and special rules were put in place to support those people because they couldn't return to New Zealand because we'd closed our borders. What's different now? I'm not sure.
But Social Development Minister Carmel Sepulone says those emergency measures aren't required.
At the time when obviously COVID just hit us, and so people were caught out by that and potentially stuck overseas. And so there isn't really the argument for doing what we needed to do right at the start of the pandemic last year.
She says if people are stuck overseas due to special circumstances, they should communicate their position clearly with the Ministry of Social Development.
MSD has sent us a statement this afternoon saying Joanne had told them she was having trouble getting a flight back to New Zealand. The Ministry has told her she has until the 20th of September until her New Zealand super is stopped. It has encouraged her to keep checking the Air New Zealand website regularly to book a seat on a flight home. It is almost 19 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e hariaki nei. Coming up, Lisa Carrington's back on the water in Tokyo as she powers towards 4 golds. A promise to make the MIQ booking system fairer as those desperate to come home pay huge fees to third parties to secure a spot. Pressure's been mounting on officials to improve the booking system and increase the supply of rooms which are booked out for months. Meanwhile, companies are cashing in on the desperation of those New Zealanders stuck overseas. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
Tim has tried everything to try and get a spot in MIQ. For the past 3.5 months, he's spent 10 to 12 hours a day refreshing the booking website. He even wrote a computer script to keep refreshing the webpage.
Slightly embarrassed to say it, but I'll put my hand up and say I actually made the call to pay MIQ helpers last week to book me a slot, and it was just out of sheer frustration that I'd spent weeks upon weeks trying to book a slot, and kind of at my wit's end emotionally, I guess. I'm one of those who can put their hand up and say it kind of drove me to pay for a service to hopefully ensure I get a spot at some point.
For that booking service, he was charged $2,500, plus a $40 admin fee. But he's not alone. More and more desperate New Zealanders stuck overseas are paying thousands in a bid to secure an MIQ spot. Head of MIQ, Megan Main, says people can get others to help them secure spots in certain circumstances.
Some people can't make that booking themselves. It could be an elderly person or a child, and certainly someone can make that booking on their behalf, but they have their own login and password. Where we're breaching terms of use is where a third party asks the user to give them their login, their password and all of their personal details.
National's Chris Bishop says third-party websites should be stopped.
We had Megan Main, who's the head of MIQ, saying, only use reputable third-party websites. Well, the question is, what does reputable actually mean? And so there's some real lack of clarity there. So I think we need to be banning those third-party websites, and we need to be banning the bots. The government says they banned them, but they still seem to exist.
Megan Main says work is now underway to even the playing field.
We're looking at how we can safely and fairly let people know when vouchers are going to be released, particularly those bulk releases that we do every month or so. And I would say that every day we're re-releasing vouchers into the system.
But COVID-19 response Minister Chris Hipkins warned capacity is still going to be a factor.
We've looked at all of the different options, including other countries allocate space to airlines, and then it's up to the airlines as to how they fill that in. We've got, you could have a lottery where people just enter into a ballot. No matter how you cut it, there aren't going to be enough spaces for everybody that wants to come in, and so there will continue to be some disappointment there.
A feeling Tim is all too aware of as he waits for his voucher.
A lot of you getting in touch already about our earlier interview with Brett O'Reilly from EMA, who is calling for an amnesty for overstayers. There's a labour shortage and he reckons an amnesty is the answer, starting with Pacific Island overstayers. Now, some of you getting in touch, this one from Frank. Frank says, love Brett's boldness. Amnesty for all, Pacific first. From Frank, a Tongan Kiwi. Another listener says, why should people be rewarded given an amnesty for breaking the rules? What about the tens of thousands waiting in the immigration queue who have done the right thing? Could I put myself in a spot with great diving in Tonga and not have the rules apply to me? Immigration Department has let us down by not appropriately following their own rules. Ian's got in touch to say, why not offer residence visas to all of those that have been here since before the COVID lockdown? They have all been instrumental in our recovery after the lockdown and in many cases vital for many industries. Thanks for your feedback, Ian. And this one says overstayers should be allowed to work but should not get residency. He aha o whakaaro, what do you think of that? Send me your thoughts. You can text me on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. So, nō reira, anei ngā kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. The issues I want to hear from you on are this one, amnesty for Pacifica overstayers or not, and why. Also get in touch about how you think the MIQ system is working, still having problems, people say. The government is denouncing those spreading lies about the COVID-19 vaccine campaign, calling their behaviour reprehensible. It warns misinformation is already hobbling efforts to inoculate the population as a group of 200 protesters gathered outside Parliament this afternoon. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Treason! Treason! Treason!
The placards are a pick and mix of conspiracy theories, the campaigners from across the spectrum. There's the Trump supporters, the gun lovers, those protesting 1080, all of them united under an anti-vax banner.
Don't be a guinea pig! Don't be a guinea pig! Learn about the side effects!
The chants carry into Parliament as MPs arrive, their patience clearly wearing.
People are actively lying and sharing information that is going to cause harm, and I think that's reprehensible.
The misinformation is already causing problems for the government's vaccination campaign. 44% of port workers are yet to receive a single dose, despite it being mandatory for those at the front line by the end of September. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins puts it down to fake news spreading through the workforce. A problem he fears will only grow as the campaign rolls on.
We are not going to be forcing people to be vaccinated, but some of the misinformation is meaning that some people are scared about being vaccinated, and that is very regrettable because the information that they are being told is wrong.
And the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is frustrated too.
That misinformation risks the health of our people, and it also risks ensuring that we remain COVID-free and also our economic recovery.
The Pfizer vaccine, which is being used in New Zealand, has been assessed and approved by the country's medicine regulator. It's been formally tested on some 40,000 people and received now by tens of millions worldwide. And yet the conspiracy theories spread. ACT's leader David Seymour receives a lot of emails on the subject, including from one doctor. His email response is curt. It says, "Please stop abusing the trust people place in you by shilling utter crap."
There's not many things ACT and Labor agree about, but if we agree that this vaccine is safe, it's safer than any vaccine there's been before, and it's by and large effective, then I think people should be confident in taking it with their own medical advice.
But he says the government bears some responsibility for the misinformation spread.
Without a plan from our government, people start grasping for alternatives.
The government says it's doing what it can to promote the correct information and combat hesitancy. On Friday, people aged 55 and over will be able to begin booking vaccines 5 days earlier than planned. New Zealand passed the 2 million dose mark yesterday, Another milestone, but still a long way from the number required to keep the country safe.
It is 26 minutes past 5. Kia amo tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Frustrated workers at Marsden Point feel abandoned by the government ahead of a vote over whether to cut hundreds of jobs. Shareholders will decide on Friday whether to stop processing oil at the country's only refinery and move to an import-only setup. Today, workers had a union meeting to discuss next steps. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person caught up with them afterwards.
Northland's trademark sunshine was a stark contrast to the dark mood of refinery workers this morning.
Gutted, really. I just feel as if we never were in the fight.
Oh, very disappointed.
It's pretty frustrating. I've got a young family at home, 3 young kids, and it's pretty taxing.
Pretty pissed off, really. Disappointed in both the company and the New Zealand government.
New Zealand's next fuel crisis is starting right here, right now.
They filed out of a union meeting staring down the barrel of redundancy. A Refining NZ shareholder vote on Friday will determine if 300 jobs will be slashed to just 60 to manage an import-only terminal. But hundreds of other jobs, contractors and local businesses would also be hammered.
Ruakaka itself is going to struggle, Whangarei is going to struggle. Just things like the overalls the guys work, that's a contract that's gone straight away. All the cleaners, the people that people don't think about.
Shane Hall's been here 32 years, but next April is likely to be his last, if the refinery makes it that far.
The skill set they're going to need to keep the terminal and the pipeline going. I'm not sure if the guys are going to hang around with the way things are, with the way people are feeling that they've been treated.
Plenty of people are looking elsewhere, like Jason Newman.
We're already looking for work in Australia.
How does the whānau feel about that?
Oh, some of them are probably quite excited about the move.
Another worker says it's hard enough finding well-paid local work.
There aren't any options in Whangarei. We've got the highest unemployment in New Zealand is in Northland. That's pretty much the reality.
He says shutting the refinery is madness and far from the just transition the government promised.
They managed to subsidise Tiwai Point to keep it alive, which is not a national security asset. It doesn't provide anything for this country. It supports a multinational mining company. Yet our fuel security doesn't seem to be very important. Neither the people of Whangarei don't seem to be important. Labour won the seat of Whangarei and the seat of Northland for probably the first time in my memory ever. They will never win it again if this refinery closes. That'll be the end of Labour in Northland.
Greg Ventnor has seen this play out in Australia, where the government is subsidising its refineries to keep them open. He says it's vital we do the same here.
There only has to be a little diplomatic spat or some sort of global conflict, and we're completely dependent on Asia. The first thing they'll use is either shut that supply down in the event of a conflict, or in the event of a diplomatic spat, they will use that supply to blackmail the country.
First Union's Transport Secretary Jared Abbott says the government needs to step up and bring in a fuel levy to subsidise keeping the refinery open.
From a government perspective, it makes no sense to allow the place to shut down, and that's not even looking at the fuel security side. Once you factor in fuel security and the economic impact on any fuel disruption, then it's a no-brainer. You need to have these kind of strategic assets protected.
First Union is part of the Northland Recovery Working Group with representatives from central and local government, local businesses and Whangarei Mayor Cheryl Mai. She says different uses for the refinery site are being considered, but they're not going to come before April.
This is our tiwai, this is our taranaki, and we do definitely look to central government for their support. So the question needs to be posed to them. What are their plans? How can they help? And they're certainly around the table for those discussions.
In a statement, Energy Minister Megan Wood says the government is working with stakeholders around options for the site and will know more after Friday's vote. She says importing fuel won't affect supply because it can be sourced from multiple refineries overseas.
Let's head to Tokyo now, where after winning 2 gold medals yesterday, canoe sprint paddler Lisa Carrington was back on the water today. Carrington won gold in the K1 200 yesterday, and then just over an hour later teamed up with Caitlin Regal to also win the K2 500 event. Ko taku hoa I nai nei ko Maya Barry. Maya is live from Tokyo. Maya, bring us up to date with Carrington's gold medal chase. It continues.
Kia ora, Lisa. It sure does. After winning that K2 yesterday, Regal and Carrington back on the water as individuals today for the K1 500 heats. Fair to say those 2 gold medals she won yesterday definitely didn't seem to be weighing Lisa Carrington down. A super strong performance in these heats right from start to finish, just powering through, looking cool, calm and collected. So she now advances to tomorrow's semi-final. So does Regal. She came third in her heat. And all going well in that semi-final, they then move on to the final, which gets underway at 3 o'clock tomorrow. So that gold rush for Carrington, it could continue, looking in great shape today, and less than 24 hours now to rest those arms before she gets back on the water again.
Hey, and what about other events where we might be in the hunt for tohu toa, for medals? What's coming up?
Well, in less than a minute's time, actually, we'll have Paul Snow-Hansen and Dan Wilcox taking to the water for the men's 470 medal race in the sailing. They are sitting in 4th position heading into that race, so a chance they could sneak onto the podium there. Also tonight we'll have David Litty in the men's 109 kg plus weightlifting competition, and then also another one to watch, the cycling track. We've got the men's pursuit team racing off for bronze against our Trans-Tasman rivals Australia. And then another shot at a medal tomorrow with the shot put. We've got Tom Walsh and Jack O'Gill. They qualified 2nd and 9th respectively in their heats yesterday, or in the qualifying rather yesterday. And for those that were watching, not the easiest ride for Tom Walsh. He actually got 3 red flags for all of his 3 throws, but then after a sort of quite long and drawn out reviewing process, his best throw of the night was actually deemed legal. So he's in 2nd place to qualify for the finals, so he'll be hoping for a smoother run tomorrow.
Thanks, Maya. Maya Barry in Tokyo live. E te iwi e haere aki nei I a Checkpoint. New figures show it's a job seekers market, so is competition pushing up pay packets. Sailors Blair Tuke and Peter Burling about giving it their all and getting silver. The government's opening the border to more Pacifica RSE workers, but what about overstayers who want jobs too? Homai o whakaro, let us know your thoughts on anything you've heard on the program so far this evening. You can text us, Pātui Mai, on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can flick us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Me taki maata. Thank you, Lisa. RNZ News. Kia ora ana. The COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins has denounced those spreading lies about the Pfizer vaccine campaign, calling their behaviour reprehensible. About 200 protesters gathered outside Parliament this afternoon to rail against the government's vaccination campaign. Those in charge of managed isolation and quarantine are promising to make the booking system for vouchers fairer. Some New Zealanders overseas have been turning to booking services which charge thousands of dollars to try to obtain an MIQ voucher. The head of MIQ, Megan Main, says work is underway to even the playing field. The head of a Maori health provider in Lower Hutt is concerned about high levels of vaccine hesitancy among whānau. Teresa Olsen from Kōkiri Marae Hauora says of the 4,000 vaccinations carried out at Wainuiomata Marae, only 685 have been to Maori. Ms Olsen says some have been listening or reading about conspiracy theories, but most say they just want to wait. Official data released today shows the unemployment rate has fallen to its lowest in nearly a year, and wage increases are up more than economists expected. But there are concerns the tight labour market will add further fuel to inflation. Unemployment was at 4% in the June quarter, down from 4.7% in the previous 3 months, and lower than analysts' forecast of 4.5%. The Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust says today's admission of sexual offending by a former member of the West Coast religious community will bring some relief to victims, but the journey is far from over. A man is facing 38 charges of sexual offending between 1986 and 2012, stemming from his time at Gloriavale. He today pleaded guilty to 8 charges of indecently assaulting girls, 2 of indecently assaulting a boy, and 1 count of sexual violation. He'll face trial on the other 27. It's 5:36. That's your latest news headlines. I'll have more news at 6.
Thanks, Marama. And if you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Let's head to the business news now. Ko taku hoa naenei, ko Nicholas Poynton, who is in our Wellington studio. Nicholas, Commerce Commission wants telcos to come up with an advertising code. What's this all about?
Yeah, the regulator really wants the telecommunications sector to really tidy up its advertising around the withdrawal of copper services, because starting from September, the lines company Chorus will begin withdrawing copper from areas that already have fibre installed. It's important to note that if you don't have fibre in your area, no one's going to be coming along and ripping up and taking away your copper lines there, because the reason why the Commerce Commission is concerned about this is because this has prompted a whole lot of advertising from the telcos offering new products and expanded services as they try to retain customers and also attract new ones. But the reason why they are particularly concerned is that the people who still tend to have copper services, they say in their words, they tend to be vulnerable, they tend to be the elderly, and they don't necessarily have the highest levels of technological literacy. So they're concerned about some of the confusing and often misleading messaging that comes up in these advertising campaigns, because it could result in people signing up for products and plans and services that they don't necessarily have a need for. So the Commerce Commission, they've gone to the industry. They want some feedback to form some principles really, and then once those principles are formed, they're going to ask the industry to come up with its own advertising code that will be sort of adhered to industry-wide, that they will stick to. But if they fail to do that, the Commerce Commission does warn that they will step in and come up with its own code for the industry. So we're showing them the carrot, but there is also the threat of the stick.
Let's talk about Air New Zealand next, and its earnings are going to take a bit of a kick in the guts because of the Trans-Tasman bubble, right?
Yeah, the national carrier, they released an update this morning saying that disruption to the Trans-Tasman travel bubble, that's going to cause a sizable lift to the loss it expects to report this year. So it now expects to report an operating loss of about $530 million, that is before tax, and that's compared with its previous forecast of about $450 million loss. So what that really goes to show is that closure of the bubble, it's cost the airline about $80 million. And it says the closure of the bubble, that's going to put a squeeze on its cash flow, and it also has some looming big expenses coming in the coming months that sort of relates to sort of new airlines coming to the fold, and that's going to mean that it'll have to dip into that government debt facility. Now remember, it hasn't touched that since the beginning of the year. So far it's only borrowed about $350 million, leaving about just over $1 billion left available for it to use. And also worth mentioning that earlier this year the government did make moves to sort of change the conditions or terms around that loan, sort of reducing the cost of servicing that debt. But for the most part, the airline says it's still cash positive because of its strong domestic travel. It says it's also been supported by that government subsidy around the air cargo scheme, and it's also succeeded in deferring tax payments for about $300 million. So with regards to the bubble, you can say that the airline was able to take one significant step forward, but it's now being knocked a step back, and its share price on the back of this news, it's fallen by 0.1% to $1.48 a share. Now that I'm on the markets, I might do a quick whip around the NZX. It's up 97 points to 12,797. We heard in the bulletin before that, the positive news there about labour market statistics. Well, that really gave the dollar a shot in the arm. It's up nearly 0.5% to 70.5 US cents, and it's trading at about 95.3 Australian.
Kia ora rā e ho, that was Nicholas Poynton with new business news from our Wellington studio there. Let's go to a quick traffic update now. The northbound lane of State Highway 2 in Lower Hutt is blocked between Horticulture Road and Western Hutt Road following reports of a broken down vehicle. Now, police were notified just before 5 o'clock that a bus had broken down and was causing significant delays. Traffic management is being put in place and motorists are asked to take alternative routes where possible. It's a job seekers market with employers competing to fill roles and pumping up pay packets. Official data released today shows the unemployment rate has fallen to its lowest in nearly a year, and wage increases are up more than economists expected. But there are concerns the tight labour market will add further fuel to inflation. Anei te kai ripoata a Amy Williams.
The labour market has recovered from the shock of the global pandemic. Unemployment was at 4% in the June quarter, down from 4.7% in the previous 3 months and lower than analysts' forecast of 4.5%. Shannon Barlow is the Managing Director of Frog Recruitment and says it's good news for job seekers.
Absolutely, it's a job seekers market, and we're starting to see that they're coming into a position where the norm is to have, 2 or 3 different opportunities on the table.
But she says employers are finding it challenging to fill vacancies.
Sometimes interviews with recruiters or with the clients or employers themselves will be cancelled last minute. Most of the time it's because they've decided on one of the offers that they've already had come through and secured something.
The number of unemployed people fell by 12.4% in the June quarter, the largest quarterly percentage fall since Stats NZ's Household Labour Force survey began in 1986. The data show the economy gained 28,000 jobs during the 3 months to June. So is it time for a pat on the back? Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says it shows measures like the wage subsidy worked.
I'd hoped that we would protect people from the impacts of this 1 in 100-year economic shock. To see the proof that we have, that benefits people's lives, and I'm proud of it.
Finance Minister Grant Robertson is also happy.
That is a good result. Obviously, we're in an economy now where there is a tight labour market, but that is a result of the speed of our recovery, and we're working hard to train more people and to get alongside businesses to bring them in the people that they need.
But Kiwi Bank economist Jared Kerr says a country heading towards full employment comes with its own challenges.
The Hawke's Bay companies were telling me that they're offering Auckland wages, which is obviously quite high for that region, and trying to sell themselves as a better lifestyle choice. So yes, they are offering higher wages, but still struggling to attract the numbers that they need.
He says the job market is tight across sectors and businesses are struggling to expand because they cannot find workers.
At Kiwi Bank, we've found it particularly difficult finding IT workers and some other skilled staff. So there's definitely shortages across the board and across the country.
And inflation pressures are building with an increase in wages, a rapid drop in unemployment and more people in work. Westpac's acting chief economist, Michael Gordon, says the tight labour market is likely to fuel further inflation.
It's essentially pointing to full employment. It would be harder to maintain a rate like this or lower without seeing a really sustained lift in wage inflation and overall inflation.
The CTU is concerned wages will lag behind inflation, given over 70% of pay increases last year did not match the level of inflation. A change of job could still be anyone's best chance for a pay rise. Shannon Barlow says conducting job interviews in a tight market is like speed dating.
Employers who are able to move quickly are the ones who are winning out, and it really is a race at these times.
Regardless of the challenges, she says low unemployment is good news.
It is 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback on the issue of managed isolation and quarantine. Some pretty strong views here. MIQ doesn't work. Notifying of release won't help. 1, it creates a queue. 2, publish total numbers of rooms, total number requests for each date. Lack of info of what makes it so awful, that listener says. Someone else says, don't forget about those of us Kiwis with sick and old relatives overseas. We are desperate to get back to see our relatives and still need to get back into New Zealand. I've been trying for 3 months. Bulk releasing spots every month. What a joke. And another person says the MIQ system has kept us safe. We heard repeatedly earlier this year that there were spaces in MIQ for New Zealanders overseas who needed to come home. So why were those spaces not taken up? The system should be for genuine returnees and not for holidaymakers. He muriaki in Pita Pita Kōrero. After the news at 6, COVID kills a 20-year-old Sydney man. He's believed to be the youngest in that country to die from the virus. The head of a Maori health provider in Lower Hutt fears vaccine hesitancy among tangata whenua is leaving the community vulnerable in the event of a COVID outbreak. Capital and Coast District Health Board says it's on track to offer everyone in the region the opportunity to be vaccinated before the end of the year. Nei te kaiwi Boata, Ruth Hill.
Workers from Kokore Marae Hauora have resorted to door knocking to encourage whānau to book their COVID vaccinations. General Manager Teresa Olsen says of the 4,000 vaccinations carried out at Wainuiomata Marae, only 685 have been to Māori.
Some, they're just saying, no, not interested, not giving explanations, while others are believing in some of the conspiracy theories around about why we shouldn't have them. Others are saying, we'll just wait and see, it's too soon. We want to wait and see how effective it is, and then we'll make a decision. Others are just saying no.
Teresa Olsen says the service is offering free transport to its vaccination centres, which are now open 6 days a week and on Wednesday evenings. She says people cannot afford to be complacent about COVID, especially with the risk posed by the highly contagious Delta variant.
I'm sad, because actually I know that actually it's our people, it's Māori that will suffer the most should we have a community outbreak, and so I'm really worried about that,
Onslow Medical Centre, on the other side of Wellington, opened its vaccination clinic 6 weeks ago. Practice manager Tracy Wynne says it has the opposite problem.
Our phones ring off the hook every day. As soon as they turn on at 8 o'clock in the morning, they are ringing hot.
Mrs Wynne says it's been a huge logistical and administrative exercise to get the vaccination centres up and running, including vetting and hiring 50 new casual staff. She says the Health Ministry should have involved GP clinics earlier.
We were just hounding them, saying, look, let us in, we know what we're doing. We could be running this a lot sooner. I mean, I know that they've had a massive task on their hands, and this is a one-off occasion that we'll probably may not even see in our lifetime again, but it seems like general practices were sort of left out of the boat a little bit, that we know what we're doing, we do it every day with our normal immunisations, but it was just we had to wait.
Christchurch GP Vanessa Wenink, who chairs the Medical Association's GP Council, says the process for joining the vaccination rollout varies hugely across the country.
It's been frustrating, I think, for GPs to watch as this is kind of unfolding, because we know that eventually we'll need to help out, and we've wanted to get involved, but the processes are quite frustrating.
General Practice New Zealand Chair Jeff Lowe, a GP in the more affluent Wellington suburb of Korori, says vaccine shortages in the first 3 months of the rollout meant the priority had to be high-risk border workers. He notes it was only in May that health officials learned it was possible for the vaccine to be stored longer than 5 days in a vaccine fridge, and that was a game changer.
It would have been good to have been involved at an earlier stage in the planning so that we could gear up for that. But look, we've struck a stage now where everything's aligning, and as I say, we can now move at scale and pace.
No one from Capital and Coast District Health Board was available for interview today. However, in a written statement, it says the plan is for everyone in the region to be offered vaccination by the end of the year. The DHB says it's run several successful Pacific vaccination days, which have seen about a third of all Pacifica people over 16 receive at least one dose of the vaccine.
We gave it our all and we definitely don't hold any regrets. Silver medal winning sailor Peter Burling has described the bittersweet feeling of coming second in the 49er. Burling and sailing partner Blair Tuke had hoped to repeat their gold medal win in Rio in Tokyo, but it wasn't to be, with Great Britain edging them out of the top spot. But Peter Burling's still chuffed to be wearing silver.
It's definitely a little bit bittersweet, but I think nonetheless we're incredibly proud of the effort we've put in over the last 4 years, or to get to this point, and to know now that we've won another Olympic medal for our country. Definitely the bittersweet moment is just how close we were to achieving our goal of winning another gold. But nonetheless, we're incredibly proud to win that silver medal, and to know that we've got that wrapped up now, and morning after is pretty special.
Yeah, I mean, you are a top-class athlete, and obviously people at your level compete to win. So how do you reconcile your feelings, that sort of disappointment, and be happy with silver?
I think it takes a little while, but the thing I think we were really proud of is just the effort we had put in, and obviously we had a bit of a tough start to the week this week, and we really fought back and gave ourselves a shot in that last race, and something that it was incredibly tight. It was probably a couple of seconds in it, which is a very small margin in our sport. But it's something that we really gave it our all, and that's all you can do as an athlete is give it your all, and we definitely don't hold any regrets.
Do you reckon time will give you a bit more perspective too? Because you've had one hell of a year. I mean, you won an America's Cup, and now you got a silver medal. Yeah, and I think we're definitely pretty proud of being at our third consecutive medal at Olympic Games. But like you said, it's something that I think time will definitely make it feel a lot better than it did seconds after the finish yesterday, and it's something that I think we're just incredibly proud of the fact that we've actually managed to come here and put together a pretty solid event, and walk away with another medal. Peter, be brutal with this. Be totally upfront. What did you say to each other when you went over the line?
I can't really remember. I was definitely a little bit quiet there for a couple of seconds, and a few pats on the back, and it was something that we knew we'd put together a pretty solid race. A couple of things didn't quite go our way. With the breeze on the first upwind, we were out the right-hand side, and it didn't really quite work out. But we really took a couple of moments to sink in that we hadn't quite managed to achieve that gold medal. But then in the same time, you still managed to win a silver medal for your country, which is something that's not exactly easy to do. So I think we're just incredibly proud of that, and just looking forward to celebrating that with them over the next full period.
You've had a hell of a busy year, so how much time did you actually have to train and focus on this class of sailing?
Yeah, well, I think like everyone else, COVID really threw a bit of a curveball at the Olympic Games, and I think firstly we're obviously incredibly stoked that the Games have actually gone ahead. And I think firstly thanks to everyone here in Japan for being so welcoming. It's been an incredible time up here, and for us it's really been the priority since the America's Cup to make sure we're as ready as we could be for this competition. And it's definitely very different to any other build-up we've ever done. We haven't actually raced against, well, the whole fleet hasn't raced against each other for 18 months since our Worlds in the beginning of 2020, just because of how COVID's hit different places at different times and meant that every event has pretty much been cancelled. So it's been a very interesting build-up with not much racing, but nonetheless we felt like we were in a really good shape to be able to go and put our best foot forward, and we came so close to winning it, but too stoked to walk away with the silver nonetheless.
Peter, you're off to Europe next, right?
Yep.
So are you going to keep an eye out for a location for the America's Cup?
No, we've just been head down, making sure we're doing everything we could to try and win this Olympic medal. And one thing when you're talking about what you can be proud of with, I think we can be proud of the effort we've put into getting to the point where we were ready to compete and be proud of the fact that we've really left no stone unturned and done everything we could in the last 6 months since the America's Cup to be ready to go. And we're just going to catch up on everything else in due course.
Well, congratulations, and I'm wondering if you can do me a favour and hand the phone over to Blair.
Yep, all good.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Blair. How does Silver look this morning? Pretty damn good?
Yeah, nice addition to the room this morning. Awesome. Very proud.
Are you guys sharing a room?
No, we're not. We're the whole team. Well, I think due to COVID, everyone sort of has their own rooms these days.
Oh, fantastic. Luxury. Hey, have you had an opportunity to talk to the whānau back home?
Yeah, this morning had a chance to check in with back home. It was pretty busy after we finished competing yesterday with all the media obligations and whatnot. But nice to check in. We had a huge amount of support. Obviously, we'd normally have quite a few of our close family and friends here supporting us, but they, we've still felt that love and support from back home. So that was awesome.
And what did they say to you?
Oh, they're just very proud of what we've achieved, I guess. The ones closest to us know how much we've put into this over not just the last few months, but last few years. So they're obviously a little bit gutted with how close we came as well. But they're still just very, very proud. So it's awesome.
Blair, are you happy with silver? Can you be happy with silver?
Yeah, awesome. Win an Olympic medal for your country is an amazing achievement. So we're, like Pete mentioned on the phone just before, with how close it came to getting the gold medal. That makes it a little bit tougher at the time, but nevertheless, just to represent Aotearoa at the Olympic Games is a special thing and something we've always been very proud to do. So to now know that we're bringing another Olympic medal home is awesome.
So how did you find this Olympics straight off the back of the America's Cup?
Oh, it's been pretty good. It's been a busy few months for us. We knew if we wanted to be a chance to be competitive here, because we hadn't put in a heap of sailing over the last year on the 49er, that we'd have to just dive straight into it. So we've done that. We've prepared well. We did a trip up to Europe where we checked in with the European fleet, did 3 weeks up there, and then we trained back in New Zealand, trained a couple of weeks in Australia, and then here to Japan. So it was a good build-up, but we pushed very hard. But I guess that's what we're proud of as well. It's just the work we've put in to get to this point.
Are you going to be at Paris?
We'll wait and see. It's been a heck of a journey for us over the last few years. But we've just worked as hard as we could to try and do our best here. So we'll take stock now and reassess. But no, it's always an awesome opportunity when you get to represent your country at the Olympic Games. It's definitely.
And that is Heramana sailor Blair Tuke there. And before that, I was talking to Peter Burling. And in the 49er race yesterday, they got Tohu Toa Matawainga silver medals. Tokyo, totally cool. Good on them. Now, let's get some of your feedback before the news at 6. On the overstayer amnesty that's been suggested by the EMA, this person says as an immigrant who did everything by the books, paid all the fees, jumped through all the hoops and respected the law of New Zealand, it annoys me to no end to hear that overstayers should get an amnesty. Another listener says, I think it's highly appropriate that Pacifica are at the front of the queue for overstayer amnesties, considering they were at the front of the queue for prosecutions by the Crown during the Dawn raids. The Crown should right this historic wrong, start with Pacifica and then roll out to others. Another person says amnesty problem is that it sends the message that you don't need to follow the rules.
Kia ora, RNZ News. An employers group says it should be allowed to hire people who've overstayed their visas in New Zealand. amid a labour crunch. The government will allow recognised seasonal employer workers from Tonga, Samoa and Vanuatu to bypass MIQ in the coming months. However, the Employers and Manufacturers Association says there are already 14,000 people who likely aren't working, overstayers who may be too nervous to seek work. The Chief Executive, Brett O'Reilly, has told Checkpoint the government should allow them to.
It has a benefit for the New Zealand economy because we get them working and we get incomes into those communities. And it also has an impact for their home countries because we know that many of those people are sending remittances home to Samoa, Tonga and to other islands. And that benefits those economies who have been, really badly hit by COVID.
The labour market has tipped in favour of job seekers and employers are competing with each other to fill roles. The unemployment rate has fallen to its lowest in nearly a year and wage increases are up more than economists expected. Frog Recruitment Managing Director Shannon Barlow says it's good news for job seekers who can choose between jobs, but employers are finding it challenging to fill vacancies.
Sometimes interviews with recruiters or with the clients or employers themselves will be cancelled last minute. Most of the time it's because they've decided on one of the offers that they've already had come through and secured something.
The economy gained 28,000 jobs during the 3 months to June. The government says it's doing what it can to combat COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy. The COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins, has denounced those spreading lies about the Pfizer vaccine campaign, calling their behaviour reprehensible. About 200 anti-vaccine protesters gathered outside Parliament this afternoon. Mr Hipkins says misinformation is causing real problems and appears to be slowing vaccine uptake among port workers. He says the government will never make vaccination compulsory, despite the protesters' claims. On Friday, people aged 55 and over will be able to begin booking vaccines 5 days earlier than planned. New Zealand passed the 2 million dose mark yesterday, but is still a long way from the number required to keep the country safe. The National Party wants a ban on third-party websites that are charging people to obtain MIQ vouchers. Some New Zealanders stuck overseas have been paying businesses thousands of dollars to book them an MIQ spot due to how notoriously difficult it is to get one. National's Chris Bishop says the current system isn't working.
We had Megan Main, who's the head of MIQ, saying, only use reputable third-party websites. Well, the question is, what does reputable actually mean? And so there's some real lack of clarity there. So I think we need to be banning those third-party websites and we need to be banning the bots. The government says they've banned them, but they still seem to exist.
Chris Bishop says the party will be putting forward some ideas to the government next week. The head of MediaWorks has apologised after a review found instances of sexual harassment, the misuse of drugs and alcohol, bullying and a boys' club culture. The review by Maria Duke QC was ordered earlier this year after allegations emerged on social media about people in the local music and media industries. More than 100 current and former staff were interviewed. The radio company's chief executive, Cam Wallace, says the 46-page report is a catalyst for change.
The executive and board here at MediaWorks are determined to make this the best place to work in the media industry in New Zealand, and we strongly support the findings.
The review also highlights sexist and racist behaviour, failure to promote greater gender diversity and lack of accountability for poor behaviour. MediaWorks stations include The Edge, The Rock, Magic and More FM. Austria has reportedly granted a Belarusian sprinter a humanitarian visa after she refused her team's orders to fly home from the Olympics. Poland had earlier done the same. The woman is being flown to Vienna from Tokyo, as Phoebe Amoroso reports.
Kristina Simonouskaya departed from Tokyo on Wednesday morning. She had been expected to fly to Poland, where she has been offered a humanitarian visa, but switched at the last minute to a flight to Vienna, reportedly due to security concerns. Simonouskaya was scheduled to run in a 200-metre race on Monday, but was told by the Belarusian National Olympic Committee that she was being sent home for critical remarks she made on Instagram. However, she refused to board a flight home on Sunday and sought protection from Japanese authorities. The IOC says it has launched a disciplinary committee to hear statements from the Belarusian Olympic officials involved. It is also reviewing a report on the incident from the Belarusian National Olympic Committee.
It's 6:05. Golfer Lydia Ko has had a mixed opening round at the Tokyo Olympics. Ko, the silver medalist at Rio in 2016, posted 3 birdies, but a double bogey on the par 4 14th proved costly. She also had the chance for a relatively straightforward birdie putt on the 18th, but missed. Midway through her round, Ko was tied for 3rd, but eventually finished at 1 under par in a share of 15th spot. Ko told Sky Sport her round was clumsy at times.
There were some goods and there were some bads as well, but I think when I was out of position for most parts, I was able to recover really well. And even though that's the case, you don't want to be making clumsy mistakes. Hopefully I'll be able to tidy up the game a little bit better overall and, just give myself more opportunities for the next few days.
The leader is Madeleine Sagstrom of Sweden. White Ferns captain Sophie Devine is backing Amelia Kerr's decision to skip the Tour of England to focus on her mental health. Kerr first made the New Zealand side as a 16-year-old 5 years ago and has been a regular ever since. The 8-match Tour of England starts next month before a busy summer that includes hosting the World Cup. Devine, who also took a break from the game last summer, says player well-being is paramount.
For me in particular, it's something that I know is extremely important, and we need to remember that we need to care about the person first and foremost. So that decision's been made. We'll obviously miss Smearley on that tour, but absolutely we need to make sure that she's right and ready to go for another big 12 months ahead.
And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Do Something for Nothing. It's this week's Hunt Prize, a book about a barber offering free haircuts to the homeless. Gareth Watkins from the nation's Rainbow Archive, Pride NZ, on the recognition it's won from the US Library of Congress, and Jack Cottrell on his collection of flash fiction. That's another set of words for a very short story, which goes under the title 10 Acceptable Acts of Arson. So join me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. Northern and western areas from Northland to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Rain developing overnight or in the morning with possible thunderstorms. From Taranaki northwards, then easing for a short time later tomorrow. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Cloudy tomorrow with scattered rain from late morning. Marlborough, Nelson, Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain or showers tomorrow. For Canterbury, Otago and Southland, brief rain or showers tomorrow, mainly in the morning. And for the Kohu Chatham Islands, rain and southwest gales, both easing tomorrow morning. It's 7 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e hoa. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A 20-year-old Australian man has died of COVID in Sydney as the state continues to record hundreds of Delta cases daily. New South Wales is in lockdown until the end of the month as it tries to rein in the numbers. Queensland is also battling a Delta cluster with up to 17 new community cases today. It's locked down until at least the end of the week. Bill Botel is a professor at the University of New South Wales and a strategic health policy advisor, and he joins me now from Sydney. Hi, Bill. It's pretty scary stuff when you see a 20-year-old has died from this virus, isn't it?
Good evening, Lisa, and lovely to be with you. Yes, it's a terribly tragic event, but this is what is happening with Delta, apparently, that people have the sniffles, they feel a bit under the weather for 2 or 3 days. Maybe they go and get tested, maybe they don't. Think they can get through with it, and then about day 3 or 4 they get really clobbered, and terribly regrettably this young man has died. We had a couple of cases a week or so ago of a Samoan family in southwestern Sydney where the father was in bed and of course didn't wake up with the same sort of massive reaction to Delta. So it's terribly concerning and very upsetting, of course, for the families and friends of those involved.
Bill, as you watch this unfold, from a strategy point of view, what do you need here?
Well, in New South Wales, unfortunately, the government seems to have bit by bit come to a view that they can learn to live with COVID. And this is not the practice of the rest of Australia and, of course, in New Zealand, where since early 2020, all the governments of Australia and New Zealand have resolved that we should have zero COVID in our communities. And we got to that stage in Australia about October 2020 after a terrible second wave event in Melbourne, which remarkably they saw off from 700 cases a day down to 0. So from then until June this year, when the terribly lax quarantine arrangements at Sydney Airport allowed Delta finally to get in through and into an unvaccinated community, we've lived with COVID 0. New South Wales took far too long to lock down, about 9 or 10 days. And when they did, they only went to very moderate levels of restriction, hoping, I think, that somehow the virus would disappear. Well, of course, in a city of 5.5 million people with not adequate restrictions, it didn't. And here we are today with 233 new cases, people in ICU, regrettably people who are dying, and no clear way out of it. In the same time, Melbourne, which got hit a few weeks after, thanks to the Sydney cases, has gone through the full trajectory, and today, early this morning, recorded 0 cases, and they've just recorded one more case, but they are on the downhill run and pretty much out of it now.
So, can you vaccinate your way out of this?
No, I don't believe so, because vaccination is something that you give today or next week, but it doesn't take effect for weeks to months. That's the way vaccines work. So, of course, it's imperative that people get vaccinated. That's got to happen. In Australia, we have a choice with AstraZeneca or Pfizer, so that's got to be done, and there's a lot of mobilisation around that. But what affects the trajectory of the disease tomorrow and in the next hours and days, of course, is the full range of restrictions, stopping people moving, masks, and, of course, very importantly, money being the greatest vaccine of all in these circumstances, we have to make sure that people have enough money to stay home and not to move, particularly if they're in the gig economy or casual workers where they actually need week-to-week money to pay the rent and pay food.
But, Bill, you do have people who are wandering around still, right? Every day we watch your figures roll in New South Wales, and we get told the number of cases who are out in the community, right? So compliance is an issue. At this rate, are you still going to be locked down at Christmas?
Well, I think it's an indefinite extension if we don't do more to get it under control. We do know what works. We know what works in New Zealand. We know what works in Melbourne. The virus isn't different between New Zealand and Melbourne and Adelaide and Queensland, but what works is moving quickly. And if you haven't moved quickly, well, you've just got to do all the things now that are required to bring it under control. Otherwise, in Sydney, I think we'll be bumbling along in this limbo land for a long time to come. I hope it's not, for months, but more has to be done. And I think the people of New South Wales and Sydney are sending that message loud and clear to the government of New South Wales.
If you say more needs to be done, is the lockdown tight enough at the moment, and how do you get people to be compliant?
No, it's not tight enough. And of course, we've got a differential set of arrangements. In the southwest and west of Sydney, we have 8 local government areas where there are very stringent restrictions at the moment, but not so in the rest of Sydney. But of course, you then run into a big problem that at the borders of those local government areas, you can't have police on every corner stopping people moving in and out. The virus doesn't understand those boundaries, and there is leakage and movement, and that's what we're seeing in Sydney today. So I think it's got to be for the whole of Sydney, just as it was for the whole of Melbourne, and as it is today, of course, in Brisbane, where there were 16 new cases, and they are moved into a very stringent lockdown,
so
and
Bill,
more stringent than in Sydney.
Sorry to interrupt, but Bill, are you talking about a universal set of rules that cover absolutely everybody in New South Wales, regardless of where you are?
Well, certainly in greater metropolitan Sydney, and what worked well in Victoria in similar circumstances was the so-called ring of steel around the metropolitan area. That is, that people could not move from the metropolitan area into the regions. So those things have not been done in New South Wales, and now the people are paying a big price. I mean, the terrible toll of people who actually died in ICU, elective surgery is cancelled, the schools are closed, there is and people are suffering, of course, economically, business-wise, and in jobs and jobs being lost. So the price is very high. It's something I don't think we can keep on just paying out every day and week, hoping against hope that things will get better. They've got to take much firmer action now than they have been.
Bill, has the state lost control of this situation?
No, not lost control in the sense that we're going up exponentially, and we all know from our experience in the last year and a half what that feels like. But if it's not going up, it's not going down. And I just don't think the people are capable of living this for week after week and stretching into months with all the terrible disruption that causes. Eventually, you'd have to hope that it doesn't happen, but eventually there might well be a break point in terms of cases going up. And at that stage, I think there'll be a great deal of concern and reorganisation of the whole effort here.
Really appreciate your time this evening. Call Professor Bill Botel, Te Ra, North Sydney. He is at the New South Wales University. Migrant advocates say border exemptions for seasonal workers from the Pacific only add insult to injury for overstayers in New Zealand. The government's decided to allow recognised seasonal employer workers from Tonga, Samoa and Vanuatu to bypass MIQ. While it's in the right direction, the Migrant Workers Association says the scheme is missing a crucial ingredient. Christine Ravoy has more.
The Prime Minister says Cabinet will consider allowing in people who may have critical medical conditions from one of the countries where quarantine-free RSE workers can travel from. Premier Jacinda Ardern says she wants to get the system up and running first. But Association President Anu Kaloti says undocumented workers already in the country pose zero risk. She says the demand for workers could be partly met by getting them on the books.
We are not opposed to more migrant workers coming into the country, but there has to be some sort of priority order. It makes more sense to give those overstayers work rights so that they can actually become part of the official economy. You know, no doubt some of them would already be working unofficially and possibly in the horticulture sector.
Ms. Kaloti says amnesty for about 14,000 overstayers in New Zealand would give last weekend's Dawn Raid's apology by the government real meaning and from repeating itself.
The Tongan princess said on the day in Auckland Town Hall that, that there needed to be some action. And also many other members of the Pacifica community and other associations and unions have been calling for an amnesty. So it would be more respectful, I guess, of the community, and it would give a deeper meaning to the apology that was delivered.
A long-time RSE employer says removing the border restrictions is a huge relief for the seasonal workers who've been stuck in New Zealand for more than 18 months. Leven-based strawberry and asparagus grower Jeff Lewis says he has 20 staff who arrived 6 months before last year's national lockdown and have been waiting for free-flowing cross-border travel ever since.
This will mean us able to get them home and get another group here. They didn't want to go home until they had some confidence that they were able to just start their normal employment cycle, which tends to be 7 months in New Zealand and then 5 months back home.
Mr. Lewis says his long-term RSE workers have been the only income providers for their families back in Samoa.
We employ a lot of long haulers who are people that have been here, workers that have been here since before COVID. So they'd already done about 6 months' work when in New Zealand when COVID shut us down. So they've been here a long time and they've been very, very loyal, not only to us as employers, but they've been very, very loyal to their families and their communities because they really are the only source of income now for their whole communities back home, and they're sending the money back there.
The leader of the opposition in the Solomons, Matthew Wale, says New Zealand's decision to give quarantine-free entry to seasonal workers from Samoa, Tonga and Vanuatu has left the islanders in the lurch. Mr. Wale says there is no community transmission of the coronavirus in the Solomons, the borders are secure and many people desperately need work.
I suppose firstly I wondered what criteria was used in selecting the countries that New Zealand has extended that privilege to, and whether it is any different for Solomon Islands.
While under a third of overstayers are from Samoa or Tonga, the Migrant Workers Association says there's a distinct connection between the actions of the government and the Pacifica targeted immigration crackdowns of the 1970s. The new border exemptions to begin in September hope to meet the demand from industries like horticulture, enduring labour shortages.
It is 6:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A scathing independent review into MediaWorks has exposed allegations of sexual assault, bullying and a boys' club culture. The company's chief executive, Cam Wallace, has apologised today to current and former staff for the harm that's been caused. But one employment lawyer says it's going to take a lot to change the culture. Katie Doyle reports.
It's an extremely critical review. Sexual assault allegations, a boys' club culture, gender and race discrimination, bullying and misuse of drugs and alcohol. Ordered earlier this year, the review by Maria Ju QC arose after allegations emerged on social media about people in the New Zealand entertainment industries. In a pre-recorded statement, the chief executive of MediaWorks, Cam Wallace, thanked those who had taken part.
The executive and board here at MediaWorks are determined to make this the best place to work in the media industry in New Zealand, and we strongly support the findings.
More than 100 current staff and former staff were interviewed, and 483 workers were surveyed. The review found the company had a boys' club culture with a history of males dominating leadership positions. Part of the findings have been voiced.
It is my assessment that MediaWorks has done little to address this male dominance in MediaWorks. It is this imbalance that is causing many of the problems in the current culture. It has enabled the damaging perception of the boys' club to thrive.
Staff also reported concerns about racism or racial discrimination. Jokes that brown people don't have money, with one staff member being asked, "Can you just tone down the Maori?" The review found MediaWorks had made some effort to promote te reo on its iwi radio stations, but there were massive shortfalls.
The reports of some racist behaviour towards Maori and the lack of Maori language visible across MediaWorks' general media platforms does reinforce their experience.
Central to the report was an incident in 2019. It details the experience of a young woman who wasn't an employee attending a promotional event. She became heavily intoxicated and doesn't recall much of the evening, but knows she was involved sexually with an employee more than 20 years her senior.
Following the incident, MediaWorks failed to manage the matter properly. The people and culture team lacked the appropriate level of expertise to deal with this serious incident. There were a number of missteps made in MediaWorks' response, causing the internal investigation to be inadequate.
A leading employment lawyer, Steph Dyberg, says the review was incredibly thorough and commended the courage of those who had come forward.
And the worst thing about it is when people had the courage to speak up and be brave and make complaints or raise issues, you know, the callous indifference of the organisation to addressing that was shocking, but unfortunately in my work, not that surprising.
But she warns it will take a huge commitment from the top to effect any real change. She says simply fiddling at the margins doesn't cut it.
It takes real leadership, and it takes that leadership looking at itself first and saying, what do we as a leadership team do that contributes to this, and getting some external help with that, to say this is what you all do that perpetuates this.
The review made 32 recommendations, including committing to company-wide change, and all have been accepted by MediaWorks.
The Belarusian sprinter who refused her team's orders to fly home from the Olympics Games has boarded a flight to Vienna. Poland has granted Kristina Szymanowskaja a humanitarian visa, and it's now believed that Austria has done the same. The BBC's Sarah Rainsford reports from Belarus.
She's a young athlete thrust into a political row she never sought. When sprinter Kristina Szymanowskaja publicly criticised her coaches at the Olympics, they tried to force her back to Belarus. She refused. Speaking to the BBC from Tokyo, she said she was now scared for herself and for her family.
I can't go back to Belarus now, of course. It's definitely not safe for me. I have no idea when I can go back. It may be 5 or 10 years.
And today came another reminder of the danger for dissidents. In Kiev, a young Belarusian activist was found hanging in a park, but his friends don't believe it was suicide. Vitaly Shishov fled to Ukraine last year to avoid arrest. He'd been helping a flood of other opposition supporters who followed. The opposition leader, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, is in forced exile herself.
Well, we're very, very pleased. I'm very pleased.
She's been in London, part of a tour seeking international support. She wants tougher measures, more sanctions against Alexander Lukashenko, the man she tried to topple as president.
This is our pain, Belarusian pain. We think that much more can be done, much more pressure, much more assistance, braver decisions, stronger actions.
Since the disputed elections, the mood in Minsk has changed dramatically. Alexander Lukashenko now firmly back in control. A year ago, this entire square and all the streets around it were crammed full of protesters. It was opposition to President Alexander Lukashenko on a scale like he'd never seen before. But now there's no public sign at all of that challenge, because so many people have been arrested since then that the others have been scared into silence. Maria Kolesnikova was one of the faces of the protests, touring the country, rallying mass crowds. Tomorrow she goes on trial, accused of trying to overthrow the authorities. I met Maria's father outside her old flat. Alexander hasn't been allowed to see her since her arrest last September. But Maria writes from her cell every day to reassure him.
I know my daughter is not guilty, and she's so brave that I can't be anything but positive. She told me, whatever sentence I get, I'm ready for that. She writes to me all the time that we'll meet again soon, that everything will be okay.
But Belarus today feels anything but okay. Even our meeting is being monitored from the shadows.
Britain's youngest ever summer Olympian has come away with a bronze medal in the women's park skateboarding. Sky Brown turned 13 just last month, and her story is remarkable. Last year, she suffered skull fractures and broken limbs in a skateboarding accident that left her in ICU. The BBC's Natalie Perks spoke to Sky ahead of the competition.
Colour trees, your yellow leaves move me.
We first met a long time ago and we talked about this dream, and now you're here.
Yeah.
What does it feel like?
It's insane. It's unbelievable. It's so cool to be here. And at the village, there's like all different kinds of people, like super tall people and like super strong people.
Was there a moment where you thought, the Olympics isn't going to happen?
I thought maybe it wouldn't happen. I was like crushed. I was a little bummed, but people's lives are more important, so I thought about that and got through it.
You and I last spoke after a really serious accident that you'd had.
Yeah, that was definitely a heavy time for, my parents, my family, but I really think the accident made me want to go harder and, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
We've seen you win some big events in the last year since we last saw you. How much confidence has that given you?
I'm going to really try to get on the podium, get a medal, get a gold hopefully, but no matter what happens, I just want to inspire girls around the world, and hopefully they will see, this little girl here and like, oh, if she can do it, I can do it too. That's my goal. That's why I want to be in the Olympics.
Before we head off, some of your last feedback. This is on the amnesty being proposed for overstayers by the EMA. This listener says to suggest that we grant residency to those that are illegally in New Zealand makes a farce of our whole immigration policy. To suggest that it be Pacific Islanders is racist. Last word on this subject goes to Kara, who says, Kia ora, Lisa. These people have been working here and contributing to our society, should be supported, not labelled as overstayers. We need to recognise that many overstayers work here for the minimum adult wage. They also perform work that many of us would not touch. A little manakitanga goes a long way, ngā mihi nui, says Kara. So, we're almost out of time. The Nights and Lately team will keep you up to date throughout the evening. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a popo. First up is here from 5 o'clock tomorrow morning with Tom Walsh's dad, Peter, who's hoping to get 2 kisses from his wife and a medal when his son competes in the Olympic shot put tomorrow. Don't forget, Lisa Carrington, Caitlin Regal go head-to-head in the K1 500. we will be on the edge of our seats watching which of the Kiwis pulls it out of the bag. Ko hoki mai anō mātou a popo.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins, has denounced those spreading lies about the Pfizer vaccine campaign, calling their behaviour reprehensible. About 200 protesters gathered outside Parliament this afternoon to rail against the government's vaccination campaign. Those in charge of managed isolation and quarantine are promising to make the bookings system for vouchers fairer. Some New Zealanders overseas have been turning to booking services which charge thousands of dollars to try to obtain an MIQ voucher. The head of MIQ, Megan Main, says work is underway to even the playing field. The head of a Maori health provider in Lower Hutt is concerned about high levels of vaccine hesitancy among whānau. Teresa Olsen from Kōkiri Marae Hauora says of the 4,000 vaccinations carried out at Wainuiamata Marae, only 685 have been to Māori. Ms Olsen says some have been listening or reading about conspiracy theories, but most say they just want to wait. Official data released today shows the unemployment rate has fallen to its lowest in nearly a year, and wage increases are up more than economists expected. But there are concerns the tight labour market will add